Week number 10 of the NFL season is officially here, so in today's video, I want to go through every single game of week number 10. Now, I just want to say something real quick. I do apologize if my voice does not sound incredible throughout the video. I am dealing with a bit of a fever, but if you guys do go on to enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button. But let's go ahead and hop right into it. And we are going to begin with our Thursday Night Football matchup between the Cincinnati Bengals and the Baltimore Ravens. Now, this is a massive game for both these teams. For Cincinnati, you're obviously trying to climb out of a hole, whereas for the Ravens, you're trying to build upon what you've already done, as well as not drop a fourth game of the season. Now, this is a game where I expect a lot of points to be scored. These are two teams with two fantastic quarterbacks that are playing at a very high level, as well as two defenses that are not playing at a very high level. I expect this game to be very high scoring with a lot of passes and a lot of passing touchdowns, especially from Joe Burrow and that Bengals team. But I'm ultimately going to give the slight edge here to the Baltimore Ravens for a couple of reasons. Number one, I think their defense is a little bit better. Number two, I really trust Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry. And number three, I haven't seen anything from the Bengals against a good team that would make me feel like they could win this game, so I'm going to pick the Ravens to win 38-27. Then we move over to the New York Giants versus the Carolina Panthers. Now, don't quote me on this, but I believe this game is being played in Germany, so that is a very bad game to show off to your German fan base, but it is what it is. Now, I have a bit of a hot take here, but with Bryce Young starting yet again, I actually kind of feel like he should be in for a really solid second game in a row. Yes, the Giants do have a very solid defensive line and honestly a really solid front seven, but I'm not really too concerned about that because the Panthers' offensive line has been pretty solid this year. And when I look at the secondary for New York, it's pretty darn weak. And yes, Carolina doesn't have fantastic weapons, but it does feel like they're starting to get a bit more of a groove in that offense, especially from what we saw last week. I know the Saints are a bad team and Carolina had to put together a game-winning drive to beat them, but it's kind of a similar scenario here as well, where the Giants are also not a good team as well, and Carolina could have a chance to potentially win this game. Ultimately, I do think the Giants are a bit more of a talented team, and in my opinion, they're also a better coach team, so everything would indicate that I would want to go for the Giants, but I'm actually going to pick Carolina here to have the upset for the week. I think this is an awesome opportunity for Bryce Young to have a second straight performance of him playing at a high level, so I think he's going to have that type of game and win this one 21-13. Then we begin our noon game, starting off with the Chicago Bears versus the New England Patriots. Now, if Drake May does play this game, again, he's been dealing with some injuries, but I do expect him to play this one. This is probably going to be the best defense that he's faced thus far through his career. Chicago's defense is very awesome, has a lot of really good pieces, a good pass rush, a good secondary, and as long as that is intact, there's no injuries or there's no just crazy variance that happens in this game, I expect the Bears defense to hold that offense to less than probably 25, 24 points. So really it's going to come down to can Caleb Williams and that offense actually get going from the get-go. Unfortunately for this Bears team, it's just been really tough for them to actually get going early. I thought last week they did a better job of it, but ultimately they did not win that game, of course. This is a massive game for Chicago because if you lose this game, you're probably pushing yourself a little bit behind in the wild card race, whereas if you actually win this one, you're still giving yourself a chance. Hopefully, we get a bounce-back performance here from Caleb, DJ Moore, Keenan Allen, and all those guys. So I am going to pick the Bears to win this one, but I could expect a bit of a close affair here between the number 1 overall pick and the number 3 overall pick. But I have the Patriots losing 24-17. Next up, we have the San Francisco 49ers versus the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Now, San Francisco is coming off of a bye, which does bode well for them because they are supposed to be getting Christian McCaffrey back either this week or next week, as well as potentially having Deebo Samuel return. So those are two very important additions to this offense. I'm going to work under the assumption that both those players do play in this game, but even if they don't play, it doesn't really change my perspective of this game all that much. For Tampa Bay, they're just so injured in the receiving core right now that they just don't have a really fair shot to beat this really good San Francisco team. If Tampa Bay is going to want to win this game, they're going to have to run the ball effectively, and they're going to have to make this game a very ugly defensive battle. And unfortunately, I just think that San Francisco team is starting to play better offensively, and I think Brock Purdy's a good quarterback who, when healthy with all his guys, is a almost unstoppable offense. Yes, Tampa Bay took the Kansas City Chiefs to overtime, but that's a Chiefs offense that isn't as good, at least in my personal opinion, as this Niners offense, at least as of right now. So because of that, I do think San Francisco will be able to score a bunch of points, and it's really going to come down to can Tampa Bay match that effort, and I just don't think they're going to be able to do so. I do think it's a close game, but I have San Francisco winning 31-24. Speaking of the Kansas City Chiefs, let's go ahead and move over to Chiefs versus Broncos. This is a really big matchup for both these teams. Obviously, Denver's had a pretty strong start to the season given what our expectations for them were. And if they really want to have a similar chance to Chicago to make the AFC playoffs, they kind of need to win this game. Ultimately, you're 5-4, and sure, you could still lose this game and go 5-5 and still find a way to make the playoffs. But if you can win this one, you're 6-4 and have a very good shot at making the playoffs. Whereas for Kansas City, you're coming off a kind of a tough battle against Tampa Bay, a game that you thought you'd be able to win early, but ultimately it went to overtime. But you're undefeated, so maybe you take the day off type of thing. With that said, though, if both teams are playing at what we know both teams can play like, this game should actually be pretty interesting. The biggest thing, and I think the biggest storyline that I want to see come out of this game, is I hope that Bo Nix plays well against this really good Chiefs defense. There's been a lot of criticisms on Bo Nix, and I think a lot of them have been rightful and just, but I also think that he's been playing at a very high level given what he's been asked to do. So in this game versus a really good Chiefs defense, I just hope that Bo Nix can keep this one competitive and actually look like a really solid starter at the NFL level. And I think for the Chiefs, this is a tough matchup going up against that really good Broncos defense, but when you have Mahomes, you have this new connection with DeAndre Hopkins, and you have all these other pieces, it's really going to be hard for Denver to shut them out for the entirety of the game. And because Denver doesn't have a super high-powered offense, I do expect Kansas City to be able to score enough points to ultimately kind of slug this one out. So because of that, I am going to pick Kansas City to win 24-20. Moving over to the Bills versus the Indianapolis Colts. Now, as of when I'm making this video, there has not been a starter named for the Indianapolis Colts. From everything that I've been reading, it does sound like Joe Flacco will start again. I think that's a massive mistake because we just saw last week that Joe Flacco isn't, Joe Flacco of the old. And I think Anthony Richardson at least gives them a chance, especially going up against a really awesome Bills team. Oddly enough, I actually kind of don't expect this one to be terribly high scoring. I know that both these teams are a little bit interesting in terms of how their rosters have been built and in terms of the overall talent on these teams. These are two teams that don't really have the flashiest names in the world. Like, yes, you have Josh Allen, but who else is a flashy name on that team? Maybe like, I don't know, Khalil Shakir is probably the second biggest name on that team. Whereas for Indianapolis, if Anthony Richardson isn't playing, the biggest names on that team, at least offensively, is Jonathan Taylor and Michael Pittman Jr. So these are two teams that I think are very good, but just don't have those massive big name qualities, again, outside of those guys I just mentioned. So because I feel like the talent level is somewhat similar in this game, I kind of feel like it's going to be one of those weird games that you expect to be high scoring, but actually it kind of turns out to just be a bit of a low scoring affair where both teams are just struggling for whatever reason. Given all that though, given the fact that I think both these teams are similarly in terms of the talent, I do expect Buffalo with Josh Allen to win the game. The quarterback disparity is just way too big. So I do have Buffalo winning 17-14. Moving over to the Steelers versus the Washington Commanders. This should be a really awesome matchup between two teams that I think are both very good. Washington has come out of nowhere and has been arguably one of the best teams in the NFC, whereas Pittsburgh, a team that has been steady for the past couple years, has looked a little bit rejuvenized here with Russell Wilson. Now for this Steelers team, this is the beginning of their second half of the season. They're coming off of a bye. They are now going into the harder part of their schedule, and it does start off with this Commanders team. Now I'll say this, I'm not fully bought into this Commanders team as a Super Bowl contender quite yet. Why, you might ask? I don't fully believe in that defense. Yes, they just brought in Marshawn Lattimore. We'll see if that does work out for them, but I'm just still not fully bought into that Commanders defense, but I am fully bought into that Commanders offense. When you look at this game, this is a Steelers team that has been together for many years, whereas this is a Commanders team that hasn't been together for very long. They've kind of just put everything together this year, and so far it's been really good. I expect TJ Watt to have a massive day. I do expect the Steelers defense to play at a very high level. For Washington, I hope that this team can put the ball in the end zone, because if they're kicking field goals, I kind of feel like they're going to be behind the 8 ball in this game. But if they're scoring touchdowns, I think they could honestly match the Pittsburgh Steelers for the entire game and potentially win the whole thing. For Pittsburgh, defensively, force field goals, get to the quarterback, create some turnovers, and I think they'll win this one pretty handily, because I do think this Steelers offense should have success against this Commanders defense that I'm just not fully bought into yet. And because I believe in Joey Porter Jr., because I believe in TJ Watt and all those other studs, I kind of feel like Pittsburgh should be a bit of a favorite in this game. So I am going to pick Pittsburgh to win a very close game that could come down to the wire, 28-21. Moving over to the Minnesota Vikings versus the Jacksonville Jaguars. Now, Jacksonville has not been a very good team this year, but everything that I've been seeing lately has been a bit more positive from the terrible start to their season. Trevor Lawrence isn't playing better, still not great, but better, and Brian Thomas Jr. has been a total stud for this team. Whereas for Minnesota, you did just drop 2 games a few weeks ago, but you got back back on the right track last week against a really good team. And even though their game against the Colts was ugly, I thought that they played better than what their score indicated. And when you're going up against a team like the Jacksonville Jaguars, you're going to be the heavy favorite for a reason. This is a Vikings defense that I could see giving a ton of fits and issues to Trevor Lawrence and that offense, because let's just face it, that offense is not very good, especially against really good defenses. And because Jacksonville's defense isn't particularly good, at least in the secondary and at least in the back level, I expect Justin Jefferson, Jordan Addison, and TJ Hawkinson to have a field day out there. So because of that, I think Minnesota wins this one fairly handily. I don't think it's particularly close, but maybe Jacksonville can keep this one interesting like they did last week for the majority of the game. I have the final score 22-14. Moving over to an NFC South showdown between the Atlanta Falcons and the New Orleans Saints. Now for New Orleans, you did get Derek Carr back last week, but you lost to the Carolina Panthers, arguably the worst team in the entire NFL. Whereas for Atlanta, they've been pretty good this year. They've had some stinkers here and there. The biggest stinker I could think of was that Seahawks game, but I felt like last week they performed at a very high level versus that Cowboys team, and I feel like that should honestly translate into this game as well. Similar to the Cowboys, the Saints are also dealing with a crap ton of injuries. They're also just dealing with bad coaching and all these other issues. With the firing of Dennis Allen, who knows what that Saints team is even fighting for at this point? Who knows what they're even going to look like in this game? So, on one hand, maybe the new coaching hire can give the Saints team a burst of energy and maybe they find a way to win this game. But let's just keep it real. There's a bunch of issues going on for New Orleans, and that just is not going to happen. At this point, the Saints players are just fighting for paychecks. They're fighting for their next job. They're not fighting for this organization. Let's just keep it real here. Atlanta, though, they are fighting for their coach. They're fighting for their team. They're trying to make the playoffs, and because that team is more united, with or without Drake London, I do think they'll win this game 21-10. Then we begin our 3 o'clock games here with the Tennessee Titans and the LA Chargers. Now, Tennessee has not been playing at a very high level much of the season. Now, the interesting thing about predicting this one is we don't know who the starting quarterback will be for Tennessee. There is some optimism that Will Levis will play this week, but there was also optimism that he was going to play last week, and that did not happen. So I don't really know if that changes my opinion too much of this game, but maybe if Will Levis does play, it could be a more competitive game, because I do think the Chargers will find a way to win this one. Surprisingly, and honestly happily surprising, that Chargers team has actually been really good this season on the defensive side of things, especially. That defense is ranking top 10, top 5 in a bunch of different statistics, which is something that I didn't think was going to happen. So shout out to that Chargers defense. I expect them to give a ton, and I mean a ton, of issues to either Will Levis or Mason Rudolph. And as long as Justin Herbert doesn't turn the ball over a bunch, which he will not because he's a great quarterback, I expect them to win this one pretty honestly easily. I expect the Titans defense to hold up for the majority of the game, but I do think eventually the crack for the wall is going to break, and the Chargers will win this one 27-22. Then we have the New York Jets versus the Arizona Cardinals. Surprisingly, the Cardinals are actually first place in their division, so they have actually a bunch to fight for in this game. Whereas for the Jets, you're in a really big ditch and you're trying to climb your way back up. So this kind of makes a really fun matchup here between two teams that actually really need to find a way to win this game. Now, the nice thing for the Jets here is that Cardinals defense isn't particularly good. They're not bad, but they're not good. And when you have a genius like Aaron Rodgers and all those studs on the offensive end, I do expect this to be a really nice game from that offense, barring turnovers or barring some crazy mistakes like we've seen from this team kind of consistently. For Arizona's offense, this should be a really fun matchup versus this Jets defense. The Jets defense hasn't looked great this year, but they've started to look a little bit better recently. So I think it's very important that this Cardinals team can effectively run the football, which this Jets defense has shown the ability to not necessarily be great against the run. I want to see Marvin Harrison Jr. be a focal point of the offensive game plan. I think if both those things do happen, that could give the Jets defense a lot of fits, and maybe Arizona could find a way to win this one. But given the fact that the Jets are just coming off a win versus a great Texans team, and they're starting to play a little bit better football, and I think they are way more talented than that Cardinals team, I do think the Jets will find a way to win this one and start to build the momentum towards potentially getting closer to 500. I have the Jets winning 26-22. And then we have maybe the game of the day in terms of rivalries, but not necessarily the play on the field, and that's between the Dallas Cowboys and the Philadelphia Eagles. Unfortunately, the Dallas Cowboys are just a total calamity right now. They're a total mess. It's kind of funny, let's just be honest. I know I'm repping Dallas, I know I'm repping the Rangers, and I am a Cowboys fan, but it's kind of funny, I'm not gonna lie. For Dallas, no Dak Prescott, maybe no CeeDee Lamb, maybe no Micah Parsons, maybe no Deron Bland, and a number of other guys who are also missing times like Sam Williams and the rookie Marshawn Nealand and Brandon Cooks, and I can go on and on and on. And I've already talked about basically the entire season, all the Dallas Cowboys issues. They cannot run the football, and now they have all these injuries, which just makes things all that much worse. I will say Dallas does does have a very good backup quarterback, and honestly, two very good backup quarterbacks in Cooper Rush, who I expect to start, or Trey Lance if they do decide to go down that route. So I do think they could keep this one competitive because for whatever reason, Cooper Rush is just really good. I don't know why. He isn't great. He's not better than Dak Prescott. Let's not start this BS. He's just good for whatever reason. But this is the Philadelphia Eagles. They are way more talented. They're also just playing better football right now. They got Saquon Barkley just cooking out there. This dude had a backwards hurdle last week. So yeah, I'm going Philadelphia. I don't think this game was going to be all that close. I kind of expect it to be a typical Cowboys game where they go down big by half and then find a way to kind of bounce back late into the game. But I think Philadelphia wins 30-20. And then we have our 7 o'clock game, our Sunday night football game between the Detroit Lions and the Houston Texans. Now, this is a massive game for the Houston Texans. I kind of feel like they have to win this one against a really good Lions team, but this is going to be a tough matchup for the Houston Texans to overcome. I will say the Texans' offensive line doesn't necessarily have a huge threat in front of them. That Lions defensive line with their pass rush isn't great right now. Yes, you did just get Zadarius Smith. We'll see if he gets going in this one, but I kind of feel like this Texans offensive line has to put their foot down and protect CJ Stroud in this game because you're not going up against a particularly good pass rush, at least from what we know of. This is also a secondary for Detroit that has shown some issues, especially with the rookie Terran Arnold and some holding penalties. So I feel like if you could get Tank Dell on some favorable matchups, that could definitely help out this offense, get the ball down the field. I expect a heavy dose of Joe Mixon. I've been saying that basically every single week. I hope they feed to Joe Mixon, rely on the running back ability of him, rely on the run blocking ability of your offensive line, and don't put CJ Stroud in a bunch of big time issues. I also expect the Texans defense to hold their end of the deal up. This is a really good Lions offense who can easily go for 50, but I don't think that's going to happen. For Detroit, I mean, you're in an advantageous position right now because you've only lost one game and you're clearly maybe the best team in the entire NFL. Jared Goff has been playing some really clean football. The offense has just been pure. It's just been awesome this year. And defensively, they're still playing at a high level despite not having Aiden Hutchinson. I feel like this is a good test for both these teams because we haven't really seen Detroit go up against a fantastic team yet. Don't quote me on that. I could be wrong, but this is a good and fantastic Texans team. But ultimately speaking, I just feel like Detroit is going to find a way to win this one. Houston is dealing with a bunch of injuries on the offensive end. No Nico Collins. Will Anderson's dealing with some injuries. So we'll see if those guys can play this week. That would definitely help them out. But if they don't have those guys, I don't think they actually have a chance. With that all said, I do have the Lions winning this one 27-17. And then lastly, we have the Miami Dolphins going up against the LA Rams on Monday Night Football. Both these teams have started the season off incredibly slow, primarily due to injuries, but have been playing some better football lately. For the Rams, it has resulted in wins. Unfortunately for the Dolphins, it has not resulted in wins. But I kind of feel like that's going to change this week. This is a Rams defense that does not have a very good secondary. They're also a little bit suspect on the defensive line outside of Jared Verse. He's a freaking stud. So I expect this Dolphins offense to have the ability to move the ball down the field almost at will. I expect a massive game here from Tyreek Hill. I feel like he's almost due for one at this point. And even though I do think that this Rams offense will get going in this game, I just don't know if they're going to have that big explosive ability like that Dolphins team can do. This Dolphins team doesn't just have to rely on the big gains from Tyreek and Waddle. They can move the ball methodically through screens, through dumping it off, and through running the football. So I feel like all those things do play in an advantageous role for this Miami Dolphins team. And this is the Dolphins team that if they want to have any chance of making a late run to make the playoffs, they've got to find a way to win this one. I know the Rams are also in a similar position, and this game could be a toss-up game, but I am going to lean towards the Miami Dolphins because I think their offense is playing a little bit better right now. I know it hasn't resulted in wins, but now this is the third game back with Tua. I expect it to result in a win. I have the final score 28-18. But if you guys did enjoy the video, make sure you guys hit the like and subscribe button, and I love you guys. Peace.